Good morning. So I decided to give you a gift. So I was looking forward to 4th of July weekend. So I thought, how could I give a gift while I'm here in London? So it's not uncommon for me and my capacity for folks to book 30 minutes on my schedule and come in with 100 PowerPoint slides and have some expectation that they're going to get through them. So my gift to you is I brought one slide. And I intend to get through it. So my homework assignment was to come in and talk about two things. I'm going to talk about three. So one, give some context for operational use of contractors. And I'll talk to you about what we've done in the US. And I'll give you a historic perspective. Two, I was told to talk about lessons learned. The third, you could consider it part of a gift, is this notion of lessons learned. I actually don't allow people to use that term in my office. And it's because what I've discovered in my organization is that we collect a lot of lessons learned. What I have not been able to find is the application of all of those lessons learned. And so the third part of this discussion will be about applied lessons. That's the lexicon I use in my office, is don't talk to me unless we're going to talk about how to apply those lessons. So those are the three things we'll cover. We'll do it very, very quickly, and I will do it with one slide. And then there will be a raucous round of applause at the end of this. Can I have my slide, please? So the intent is I want to point out about four things on this slide. It's all you really need to know about our operational use of contractors on the battlefield, because there's a lot of information in this one document. So first of all, I'd want to point out to you on the top, it really talks to the U.S. Army and our department have had contractors on the battlefield since the very beginning. This is not new, and anyone that believes it's new is foolish. We rely on contractors. But what I'd also point out to you is that as you look at that progression over time, it's not linear. So when you start to look at those ratios, what should leap out at you is the change that occurred roughly around the time of the Balkans. So when you start to look at the ratio between the number of contractors on the battlefield relative to the number of soldiers, boots on the ground, you'll see the increase. The second aspect is if you look at the lower axis, you'll see the level of complexity associated with the use of contractors has also changed. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But you've gone from simple food services, transportation, those types of items, to analysts, pilots, linguists. You've brought in a lot of capability. And there's a factor here that was discussed yesterday, and there was a reference made in the opening to the geopolitical environment. So the practical reality for us, the political implications, in many cases, determine the amount of boots on the ground that you'll have. And so if you look at the call-out box that shows Afghanistan, just as a frame of reference for you, and this is relatively current data as of the end of the second quarter for us, 30,000 contractors on the ground in Afghanistan for the U.S. Now, it's important to dissect that a little because that 30,000 is in relation to roughly 8,000 soldiers. There's another 2,000 or so that are involved in the retrograde operations, but about 8,000 boots on the ground, and that's capped politically for us. So now you look at the real ratio for Afghanistan during this phase of the fight, you're actually closer to 1.8, 1 to 2, but the ratio has changed significantly. And so when you're limited by that number, where you have to focus is on, so what provides me the combat power or the specific needs of the organization, the commander, and then what are those things that I can fulfill using contract and contract support. It's an important part of this dialogue. But even that 30,000, you have to understand the component of that. So that 30,000 number breaks out to roughly 12,000 U.S. citizens, U.S. contractors. 10,000 of those are host nation. Our contractors have hired Afghan nationals to support their operations. And then what's also interesting is that the remainder, roughly 8,000, are from third countries, other nations other than Afghans and the U.S. And so there's a dynamic in that quantity that you have to understand, and you have to understand laws, host nation requirements, all of those aspects that add complexity to not just the numbers, but the type of work that's being done, where it's being done where it's also being done. And I would tell you that those of you who have served in Afghanistan, one of those things that should leap out at you in terms of complexity is the notion of armed security. The complexity associated with that, I personally had the opportunity to live, but there were legal implications as well as political implications that had to be addressed. So if I could ask you to take anything away from this slide, it's really over time, you've seen those ratios change. The complexity level has changed, and you have to understand what the components of contractor support equals. So if you accept the fact that we have used in the past and will continue to use in the future, now we should have some discussion about lessons learned. So we'll leave the slide. Since I gave you a gift, I'm just going to leave it up there. But I want to talk about lessons learned. So I can reduce it to two key items. You can write these down. First, it's commander's business. Very simple. It's commander's business. The commander needs to understand and be aware of the requirements for contractor support. That's not something that you offload to someone, because those individuals, those organizations are going to operate within your battle space. In some cases, there will be demands placed on the commander for security, which will affect his or her ability to execute their mission. So it has to start and finish with the commander's engagement. Second, got to have a plan. I know that sounds pretty reasonable, but quite frankly, if I could talk to this slide, and especially within the last 14 or 15 years, there was a certain level of ad hocery, if you will, as we learned along the way. And so if you accept that we've done it since we started as a nation, that the ratio today is almost 2 contractors for 1 soldier on the ground, it should at least get you to start thinking that you should plan for the next one. Those are the 2 big takeaways that I would offer in terms of lessons learned. Now, there are smart people who have written reams of papers about operational contract support. But if you walk out of here and start a conversation with those 2 items, you'll be the smartest person in the room. So I told you that lessons learned don't really mean a lot unless you have taken those, synthesized them, and now done something to affect behavior. And so the remainder of my chat will really be about what have we taken out of those 2 key points and now institutionalized within our Army. So let me start by telling you, I am not a logistician. I'm a technologist. I build things. And so walking into this position and then understanding my role in operational contract support was a little bit of a leap. But because I had served in Afghanistan and saw both the benefits and the negative aspects of how we planned and executed contract support, I've dedicated an entire team to write policy, to write doctrine in support of where we want to go. And not only that, I isolated them from other aspects of the big Army so that they would not be constrained by resources. And that team consists of operators, contract specialists, and logisticians. And they are writing Army pubs and policy to be instituted. So that's the first thing. We are writing doctrine associated with how you use contractors in the fight. The second thing that we're doing, and I find this to be remarkable, is that we are actually exercising operational contract support within our combat training centers. So units that deploy to our National Training Center, people that deploy to our Joint Readiness Training Centers, as part of their scenario, they are required to now identify requirements and execute contracts in support of wastewater, food, latrines, all of those things that in many cases were done for them. Those are now part of their routine so that when we deploy for a contingency, it becomes part of their DNA. And then the third thing that we've done is we've incorporated operational contract support into our general officer training. So to date, we have put about 85 general officers and senior civilian executives through a general officer procurement course so that as commanders, they know to ask the questions. So we've had some very interesting discussions that have talked about the tactics, the political environment, all of those things that we know we have to deal with. It's unfortunate that I start the conversation by saying that this is commander's business. The commander already has a lot of things to do. But I would offer to you that mission success, specifically in the environments that we're going to operate in today, require this to be commander's business and for you to have a plan. I'm going to stop and I will take questions as we move along. Thank you very much.